Zipper rolls out to the right, pitches off to Taylor, and Taylor's to the 20, down to the 15, down to the 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Billy Taylor scored a touchdown from 21 yards out. The crowd goes berserk. It was November 22nd, 1969. That they came to Barry, Michigan, all dressed in maize and blue. The words were said, the prayers were read, and everybody cried. But when they closed the coffin, there was someone else inside. Oh, they came to Barry, Michigan, but Michigan wasn't dead. And when the game was over, it was someone else instead. 11 Michigan Wolverines put on the gloves of gray, and as the organ played the victors, they laid Woody Hayes away. Under center is Wangler at the 45. He goes back. He's looking for a receiver. He throws downfield to Carter. Who's got it better than us? Nobody!
Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Our guest on this week's Visitors Edition is Graham Couch from the Lansing State Journal. Before he joins us, though, let's begin as we always do during the season with my view from Section 17. A season that started with high expectations has gone south for the Spartans. The offense is anemic and lacks playmakers. Brian Lewerke has been up and down, and the offensive line has been injury-plagued. The defense that played very well early in the season seems to be running on fumes. They are missing their leader, have a leaky secondary, and again, they just seem to be wearing out. Add to that the speculation that swirls around their head coach. Will he come back and make the changes needed? Or will he say it's been a good run and at 63 just walk away? With all of that going on, this game should be a rout, right? I suppose it could end up that way, but I would be surprised. This game means too much to them. It's their Super Bowl. We've seen that over and over. For us, it's Michigan State. What else do you need to say? We've won 3 of the last 11 games with these guys, and for each of those 8 losses, we hear about it for 365 days from our Spartan brethren we share this mitten with. It is grueling. For us, it's time to ramp it up and get this final 3-game stretch started on the right foot. We're coming off a bye week. We are as healthy as we've been all year. It's time. Time to start fast, keep the pedal on the gas, and put these guys away. Don't let them hang around. They are a wounded rival, and as we've seen 8 times in the last 11 years, you can count them out, but their head coach usually makes the best of moments like this, and they will bring it, but I think we will too. Our guest today says he cannot imagine a scenario that has Michigan State winning this game. He says they will play hard, but they just don't have the pieces or the talent to beat us if we decide to play the way we can. Graham Couch from the Lansing State Journal is on deck here on our Visitors Edition of the Michigan Man in partnership with our friends at SB Nation's Maize and Brew, so stay tuned. Here with us on our Visitors segment again this year is Graham Couch from the Lansing State Journal. Great to have you back with us, Graham.
Glad to be here.
Well, looking back at last week, I watched the first half and I tuned out after that because I thought, hey, this one's in hand for the Spartans. In the end, they rolled up over 500 yards of offense against Illinois and then lost it in heartbreaking fashion. And, you know, in the midst of a season that's had its struggles, that can be a crushing kind of a loss, can't it?
It absolutely can. You see kids and players and athletes be resilient all the time, but that is it may be the worst. I don't know if it's the worst loss in Mark D'Antonio's tenure, but it's certainly the collapse was epic. To have a 21-point lead like that in the fourth quarter, and it wasn't just that you had the lead; that they had dominated the early stages of that game, really convincing. I mean, to have that flip like that, that's a tough one to overcome, especially. This was the first game in a while that wasn't a top 10 team. You were playing a step down in competition, and you were controlling it.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a lot of things going for them, and it's going to be a tough one to get over.
What is going on with the offense, and why all of the struggles?
It begins up front, and they've not been able to run the ball consistently, and that's a 3-4 year problem at this point. And that it begins there, and that offensive line has been an issue since 2015. That was the last year they were really able to impose their will on anybody, and that was the playoff team. And then they don't have a lot of game breakers, at least among their veteran receivers and pass catchers, and that's been an issue too, because it is you can see the struggle to get separation. You look at a KJ Hamler at Penn State,
mm-hmm.
And you see what he does for them. They don't have a guy like that. They don't have somebody that strikes fear into opponents and stretches defenses, or can take a nice slant that's 8 yards and take it the distance. Those things that make football a little bit easier. They really don't have that. And those two components, not having a game breaker as a playmaker, and then the offensive line play, which has made the running game a struggle, I'd say are the two primary reasons their offense has been the way it has. And frankly, their struggles have also been, it's not just the offense. The defense has not been what they thought it would be.
Well, getting back to that offensive line for a minute, it's been banged up quite a bit, so much so that there were 2 true freshmen starting on Saturday, weren't there?
There were, and some of that was injury. Some of that was, opportunity. I mean, they have not been great, and they are trying to, they like their young linemen, and although everybody always likes their younger players, but, they're trying to see if they have something there right now, and they got some decent play out of that, and that'll be a real test. I mean, those kids played well, but to go into the big house and hold up there in that setting, and it's a tall ask.
Well, when it's tough for the offensive line, it's really tough on the quarterback, and I know it's been that kind of a year for senior Brian Lewerke. Talk about him, though, and his play this year.
At times I thought he has not been at all the issue, and at times, like last week, he was partly. I think, he's got, he's had really good moments, and he's had, I think he's a pretty good quarterback. And I think when you look at sort of the NFL draftable grade stuff you get on him, and the idea that, some people project him playing in that league, I think he's better than he looks sometimes. And a lot of that is if you take any quarterback and give them no running game anytime the game's really on the line, they don't look very good. I did a statistical breakdown where I just took games where Connor Cook, Kirk Cousins, and Brian Lewerke all had more than 135 yards rushing, or Michigan State had more than 135 yards rushing for them in games they played, and their stats are very similar, and their wins are very similar. And you do wonder what his career would have looked like had he had the situations that the previous two were in. But then again, last week, you got to take care of the ball better than that. You're a senior quarterback, and even if you look great early, and he was great early, and it was one of those games where, you're just a little bit better than the other team in every facet, and so everything works. And that's the way it was in the first half. And then, he had his hand in all 4 turnovers. One of the interceptions was tipped. The pick 6, though, was just a really bad throw, and at a time they couldn't afford it. He was one snap that you got to fall on that was a fumble. I mean, it just, there were things that, more games are lost than won, and if he had just been taken care of them a little bit better, they win that game.
Well, the running game, because of the offensive line issues, has struggled most of the year. But redshirt freshman Elijah Collins has shown promise, Graham. He's given the ground game a nice boost, hasn't he?
He really has. He looks like a guy who could be a featured back for the next a couple of years, and you see it in certain plays, right? It's on the goal line, sort of a hesitation move, and the explosion he has. He's got, he's not Le'Veon Bell or anything yet. I mean, but there are gifts in him. The fact that he didn't start the opener is pretty wild. That they didn't see that coming out of practice, but or out of fall camp. But yeah, you see a lot in him. There are some gifts there that some of the other guys don't have. That they've really been lacking, and just some acceleration and the ability to get through tight spaces and division. And yeah, he's a natural at it. And one of the problems they had was their other two guys, the last year and coming into this year, who both have entered the transfer portal, since we're not natural running backs. They weren't running backs in high school. Mm-hmm. And it's not a rocket science position, but neither one of them seem to have great running back instincts at times, and Collins certainly does.
Over on the other side of the ball, there were such high expectations for the defense coming into the season, and the offense struggles, and that can really suck the air out of a defense, especially when you get to this point of the season. But overall, has the defense disappointed so far this year, in your opinion?
Oh, absolutely. And it's not, some of it now is explainable. In hindsight, you see things that you didn't see, right? And I don't think anybody anticipated that they're a little younger in the back end, and that's been a bigger problem, that other corner position, and just a little younger at safety. A couple guys they lost to the NFL last year who were both playing and doing well in the NFL, and you start to see just how good they were, and you knew it at the time, but their losses being felt. Khari Willis, the safety, who really took care of them a lot, and starting with the Colts, and Justin Lane, who was a fast 6'3" corner, was with the Steelers. I mean, that other corner position they've been very young at, or either young or just okay, average, and they don't really have another guy there that is anywhere near that, and it's shown up. There's no question about it, and I think it permeates the rest of the defense then too. When you don't completely trust the back end, a little of that trust is gone, and they've had some other issues. But a lot of it too is it's been situational, which has been a little weird for this team. It's the 4th and 13 against Arizona State late in the game that you just got to get a stop. Last week it's the 4th and 17 that you just got to get a stop and you win the game. You get both of those. Michigan State has 2 more wins this year if they get a 4th and 13 stop and a 4th and 17 stop. And yes, people are still not thrilled with the year, but instead of 4 and 5, you're 6 and 3, and your 3 losses were to top 10 opponents, and that could happen to anyone, even if people are unhappy the way that they unfolded. So it's the defense has absolutely been a part of that, and they haven't been. The front group has been really good, but they haven't been. A guy like Kenny Willett just hasn't had the year he had last year. Now he's seen a lot more attention than he did, but it hasn't been a banner year for them. And you go back to the Ohio State game, and it wasn't just the secondary, which they had a young player, a corner, who got really burned that day, but also Joe Bocci had a big mistake, and now you that day, and now you also have Bocci missing, which is, that's one of your 3 captains and a guy who's been kind of the soul of that defense, and he gets popped for a PED situation, and all of a sudden that just adds to it.
Well, you wrote a piece after last Saturday's game, and one of your 3 quick takes was that the loss was a collapse for the ages, and that it will define the MSU season, the team, and perhaps the final chapter of Mark D'Antonio's career. But you said if you were him, you wouldn't leave it that way. Do you think there's any real possibility he will not return next year?
Oh, sure. I think he's not somebody who's letting people in like this, but I've talked to people that are close enough to the program that think that's a possibility. I think he knows he's on his final legs, and he knows he's at this point going to have to make some decisions about staff that are hard. And do you want to do that 13 years in? How much longer do you want to do this? I think there is an absolute real possibility he doesn't return. He's got a $4.3 million retention bonus due in January, and that could factor into things. But I also think that there's what's transpiring. Like if you're Mark D'Antonio, you don't want to leave it on this. My general thing is if you beat Michigan, and again, people should coach and work as long as they want to, and he's earned the right certainly to try to get back into the fight and make some changes. But if they beat Michigan, which I really don't see happening, and I don't really see how it would happen at this point. But I would look to walk away, because at that point it would put a different feel on the season. People would be reminded why they loved you originally in the Michigan State community. That'd be 9 wins in 13 years over your rival. And you take a bow and people go, boy, that was really something. And that would change everything. If they get thumped in Ann Arbor and they're 4-6 and then they go beat Rutgers and Maryland and off the radar games just to get to a bowl game. I mean, that's just it would be such an unceremonious exit, and it's not just that they've lost a little bit, this was supposed to be a really good season for them. This was supposed to be, this wasn't some rebuilding year, and he's also been combative a little. He used to be so good at sort of reflecting the feelings of the fan base, of being in with them. And that was one of the things people loved about it. If you go back to the original Michigan game, right, it's the Mike Hart comment and the little brother comment, and his response to that, it was, pride comes before the fall. It'll never be over. It was his tone. And you got Michigan State fans for ages. It's an inferiority complex. They get kicked around by Michigan. The reason little brother hurt so much and stuck is it was absolutely true. I mean, that's the thing, right? That doesn't hurt if it's not real, right? And he spoke to a place where they were. And then he went out and did it on the field. The next year they go to Ann Arbor and win. And, so that sort of stuff is that was really important at that stage of his career, even before they won big. And now there's a disconnect. Now people just want to hear him acknowledge this isn't working. And instead, it doesn't. It feels like, and I think he knows it, but he's not communicating that. And it's become with a certain sector of the fan base adversarial, and I don't think it needs to be.
No, after all he's done for Michigan State, I can see him, choosing to walk away. You just reached that point where you've done all that you can, but there's absolutely no way that he would be fired, is there? No.
First of all, this administration is not going to do it, and not for, you never know what there's a deposition in the Curtis Blackwell lawsuit in mid-January, and so there's always a chance something really embarrassing comes out or something off the field, and they sort of mutually part ways or something. But for the most part, I nothing for on the field. I mean, he's the all-time winningest coach there. Even if this season winds up 6-6 and in Detroit in a bowl game, it was 36-5 over 3 years a few years ago, but no playoffs, 3 Big Ten titles, a Rose Bowl, and still would have beaten Michigan 8 times in 13 years. At Michigan State, you don't fire a coach who beats Michigan 8 times in 13 years.
Oh, no. Well, looking ahead to this Saturday, though, can the Spartans fix enough of their offensive issues in just 1 week, which is asking a lot, to have success against the Michigan defense?
What's weird is, and I don't know the answer to that. I don't think they'll be able to run the ball. I think the step back up and talent will be a problem there, and it's just against Illinois they could, and I don't think they will be against Michigan. That said, it was interesting early in the first half because the original quick takes I was sort of writing when this looked like a Michigan State blowout over Illinois was that, for all their struggles, for all that had gone wrong, at least they had kind of shown the floor of the program, the foundation was a level of play that was a cut above the lesser teams in the Big Ten, and that's important, and that they had found, they had found a measure of confidence and some rhythm, and because they looked pretty good offensively, and so maybe they'll be able to draw on some of that. Maybe some of that will stick. I think Lewerke was pretty good in the first half, and it's an offense that has enough. You got a veteran quarterback, you got a couple pieces that are experienced, you got a couple intriguing young players. It has a chance to find something to score a couple times. The problem is, if Michigan is what they look like the last 10 quarters, I don't know how you keep pace. And I don't know how you keep. Now, that said, I mean, there have been a number of Michigan State games. I'm probably going to get into this week, and sort of you look back at the Michigan State games in the years Michigan has been heavily favored. It doesn't always go quite like that. Now, Michigan often has won, but you look at the 2004 game, even the 2016 game where Michigan was a massive favorite and Michigan State was in the middle of a 3-9 season. That wound up being a 9-point game and was competitive to some degree. And so I do think there's a chance this is a fight. And the Michigan State players who are playing in this game, a lot of them have won in Ann Arbor, and so there will be a confidence there. They won the last 2 times as a program there. But it's hard to imagine an offense that is complete enough to win in Ann Arbor. And I've seen enough of them this year, and I saw what happened at Wisconsin and against Penn State. And, Ohio State was probably the most promising there is. I mean, people kind of lump Ohio State in with everything that happened. Michigan State played Ohio State as well as anybody did. I mean, it was a relatively competitive game. And if they don't fumble twice on their first 2 possessions, which I think eventually wore down the defense a little bit because they were on the field so much. But the defense is great against Ohio State early, and then Ohio State just has the game breakers to break big plays, and the offense, moved the ball fine against them. I think there were promising signs there that they could be a competitive team against really good teams. And, if Michigan is a step down from Ohio State, and I don't know how far that step is right now, Michigan looks really good the last few weeks, but then maybe there's a shot for them to be in the game. The other problem for Michigan State is not just being in the game. It's that one of the character traits you now see from MSU is that they do not finish games well. When things can go wrong, they do. And they finished the Indiana game well and things like that. But the trait at the end of the Arizona State, at the end of Illinois, that's sort of become a little bit of who they are. And so even if this is relatively competitive and they're able to pull that off, the idea that they would be the team to make the plays late to win the game seems far-fetched.
Well, final question, Graham. Last week in your post-game piece, you said it was hard to picture the game this week against Michigan not getting ugly for the Spartans. Do you still see it that way?
Yeah, I mean, I can't picture it not getting ugly. It's probably but certainly at the time, that's the way it's. I mean, the one thing I'll say to that is not even Michigan State as much as, and this is a different type of game. And Michigan State does have the goods up front defensively to be competitive. This isn't a game where they're going to be overwhelmed, across the board or anything. So I think there's a chance certain ways, but the one other chance I have is, do you entirely trust Michigan yet? Now, I'm starting to. Like, you watch what they did in Notre Dame, and that's just an impressive performance. The way they did it on the ground, the way they, but that was a competitive game for a while, and then they broke it open. You watch that second half at Penn State, and then Maryland. It wasn't. But they're just better than Maryland, and so if you trust Michigan, the answer is Michigan State's got no shot. If you trust what Michigan's become, but Michigan is also the team that not all that long ago, it was about a month ago. I thought this game was a real toss-up, and probably shouldn't even be televised based on the way the two offenses were playing. It was just brutal stuff to watch. So maybe that Michigan team still exists and has that game. It's hard to imagine coming off a bye. When they found something this late in the year against a rival, having that game, but you never know. So I think it's going to have to be a combination of things. Michigan State playing to their best offense they've shown this year, which at times has been adequate and decent, but not all that often. And then Michigan reverting back just a little bit and some of the struggles they've had, and that's to me the best shot. And the big problem for Michigan State is just that Michigan's wideouts are so good. And that's not a place that Michigan State has shown itself to be really strong right now. They got one really good corner, but he's a little undersized. We got a veteran safety who's really good. Another young safety who's very promising, that's shown flashes. But for whatever reason, that secondary is vulnerable. And that, to me, is it just doesn't – it's hard to picture Michigan State pulling an upset. Not getting ugly, I can see some scenarios, but it's I haven't even predicted it in my head 100% yet, but I don't picture it going well for MSU.
Well, it is such a huge game. There's so much on the line, as is always the case for both teams again this year. So we'll see. Hopefully we're done with our snow in this area, though, Graham, and we just get a nice, cold, sunny day, but a good game day.
Yeah, no, what you don't want is you really don't want a game ruined by weather. I'm sure Michigan State at this point thinks that might even it out, but you'd love a game where, the game is actually decided just by who the teams are.
Yeah, exactly. Well, 10 inches of snow on the ground in Ann Arbor this morning. I'm sure most of it will be there Saturday, but we shall see. Our guest on the show today on our visitor segment has been Graham Couch from the Lansing State Journal. Always great to have you on the show, Graham. We appreciate your time and look forward to the next visit.
I enjoyed it as always. Take care.
Quick Hits is next as we wrap it up for another week here on The Michigan Man on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. On Quick Hits today, we are as healthy as we've been all year. No injury news to share. Here are some game day notes surrounding this huge in-state rivalry. We lead the series with 70 wins against 36 losses, and there have been 5 ties. The first game was played on October 12, 1898, here in Ann Arbor, a 39-0 Michigan win. We won last year 21-7 in East Lansing on October 20th. Mark D'Antonio is in his 13th year as head Spartan. His record is 1-18-62. Last year they were 7-6 overall, 5-4 in the Big Ten. They lost to Oregon 7-6 in the Red Bowl. They enter Saturday's game with a 4-5 record. Kickoff will be just after noon and broadcast on FS1. It looks like a winter wonderland around here right now, and I don't think the snow is going anywhere. But the weatherman says we should be cloudy with a few peaks of sunshine. Winds will be gusty with temps near 28 at game time, climbing to near freezing for a high, so bundle up if you're coming to the big house. I'm ready. You know the Spartans will be ready, but so will Jim Harbaugh and our team. Jim said it earlier this week, throw out the records. This will be a war, and I know you hear that every year, but so often it is true. It should be a great game and a great atmosphere. That will do it for this week's Visitors Edition. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Think victory, beat MSU. Have a great Wolverine week, everyone. And until we meet again, take care, and as always, go blue. Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!